today we have Lisa Wilson. Lisa wrote A History of Stepfamilies in Early America.
Hmm. That sounds interesting.
hmm So talk to us, Lisa. What made you write this book?
Well, I was actually working on another project and I kept finding step families everywhere and realizing that no one had written about them. And there's some people that have written about them in Europe, but not in the United States. And they were everywhere. And I thought, I'm also a member of a step family. I was as a child, and I remarried as an adult with a son. So I was amazed and I thought, oh, someone needs to write this. So I started researching, and I thought the stories were very familiar, and patterns seemed to be something that looked really, to some extent, like today. And so, and I'm sort of have an agenda that normal families include step families and always have.
I saw that.
And I think that's important for everyone to realize that they've always been here.
Yeah.
And it used to be death rather than divorce, which does make a difference
Yeah.
Yeah,
in the
that's
kind
what
of
I say.
family.
That's what I say. Back in the day, it was somebody died and the next person replaced that person's role completely as the husband and the parent or the wife and the parent or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't easy because a lot of times they were not accepted, um, and the children were not ready for that either.
hmm
Some
But
things never change.
it really is scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 18th century can look anything like today, but I mean, one thing I was really obvious to me is that stepmothers particularly couldn't win for losing. There is just no way that the prejudice was so profound,
hmm
um, and they had to overcome so much to become what was becoming this idea of what they called a sentimental family, a family that was focused on love and partnership in marriage, which is kind of normal in our modern world, but was unusual then.
hmm
And so it was really important that you had this loving, kind mother that took care of the children. And what are you going to do when you have, myths like Cinderella floating around? And because it makes it seem like stepmothers could never be that, you
hmm
know?
Right.
Well, you bring
And
up an interesting point because I've read before that the idea of love and marriage is fairly new. Like it was, marriage was really more of let's see what we can do together because either we're from a similar families, or it was more about what can you do to come together as a team
hmm
to accomplish something, or because you were in two different families that wanted to be merged together for maybe economic reasons or socioeconomic reasons. And so there wasn't really anything about love in relationships or marriage that long ago. Is that what
I
you
think
found?
I think it's to some extent the case, but I might come more to realize that people spoke in a language of love in a different way than we do today. So I think I was most aware of that when I was doing my research for the book on men in New England.
hmm
I'd watch, I'd read a letter that was so different to the letters I'd read between women, where a father son, both of the ministers, would write back and forth in Bible quotes to one another. And then at the end, with great love and respect, so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, this is their intimate language.
hmm
This is what they share. And
Yeah.
so I realized, I have to read this differently and think outside the box.
hmm
And so you may not find as many kind of romantic gestures, say before the mid 18th century.
hmm
But I have a feeling the love's there. It just may not be expressed in the same way, but it's always been an economic decision. Absolutely right on that.
Yeah,
hmm
because
And
most arranged marriages were like across the pond.
Yeah, there's still arranged marriages today.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're more successful than ours, which is terrifying.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
But you know
It sure
what?
is.
To be quite honest with you, I think I'm gonna
Uh-oh.
go out on a limb here. I think I could probably pick a better mate for my kids than they can pick for
I
themselves.
know. I
Okay.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. Like that isn't the person, you know.
Right.
But you know what? I
We're-
think, my family could have said the same thing. I think my parents could have said that too.
I
About your
agree.
About my other one.
about not
Well,
not me.
probably you too. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
It's got to be better than the apps, right?
Yeah.
Getting on the apps. It's got to be better than
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. That's funny.
Absolutely. I agree. So I think, and one thing's for sure, most people were farmers, and you really can't run a farm without a wife. I have this wonderful letter that I read for another project, which was basically a 19-year-old that had inherited a farm.
Wow.
And they said, well, why don't you go on the farm and work the farm? He said, I have neither tool nor wife.
That's
Kind of the same thing, right?
That's one and the same.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Because Lori's a tool.
Yeah, you need well, you need all kinds of tools,
Yeah.
to get that farm working. And so it really was a joint effort,
Yeah.
between men and women to run a farm. There's no
Mhm.
question about it. So, but then you think about it this way: men were home. Men were home. They didn't go to work and leave. They were physically there.
They work from home.
That's right. They sure
It's like we
did.
do now.
Before it was a
That's
thing.
right. That's right. We went back in time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do
I
you,
was,
and I don't know if you researched this any when writing your book, but nowadays it seems that there is such pushback with the bio parent supporting the step parent because of guilty parent syndrome. They don't want to upset their bio kid or make the bio kid want to go live with the other parent.
that's scary, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering just
Mhm.
back then, because, things were tougher. They could beat you half to death and they didn't call DSS back then.
I know.
So I wonder if, the step parent had more support in that situation just because of the times.
Well, legally, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you have no other outside parents, so there's a divorce, not a divorce, a death. So you walk into that role, and that's even one of the ways the word step was used at the time, a person who was stepping into a role.
Yeah, Greeks,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So legally, yeah, that's true. The thing is, it's really odd because in this period before 1840, women, 48 really, women didn't have much power once they were married. When you married, all of your property became your husband's.
Mhm.
And so this makes it a very odd thing, right? So remarrying is particularly scary for women because if they remarry, that not only they have to count on this guy, not only for themselves, but for that property that came from the previous father so that it goes to the kids.
Right.
And so you find that if a woman is able financially to not remarry, she often didn't. And it was the husbands that married like lightning.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they had no one to take care of the house.
It's the other way around.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's kind of like wild. And after that time period, things change. But until then, you always have that calculation in a woman's mind. Oh, I'm really exposed here,
Yeah.
And so they're very cautious, the ones that can afford to be.
I wonder, did step parents have kind of given legal rights at all? Like, say their husband died, so now the stepmom is left responsible for the step kids.
Yeah, it's up to them. I think it's up to them whether they want to take that on. I think
Okay.
they could, pawn them off on relatives and so on of the dead husband if they wanted.
Right.
If they were good stepmothers, they take them in and raise them as their own and so on and so forth, So, but what stepfathers did not have is any financial responsibility for their stepkids at all.
Really?
No, legally none.
Hmm.
So it was expected that man dies and that money that he left behind should follow his family and take care of that particular family.
So
And
the man wouldn't get that woman's money because it came from a man or it
yeah,
came
well,
from a
he
previous husband or whatever. The
exactly. If he left,
land they would get.
well, they get everything. I mean, what would happen? It was really the man that died, if he
Hmm.
wrote the right will,
Hmm.
if he wrote a will that said, if you remarry, it all gets gone and it goes to X, Y, and Z. There were ways to write wills to protect against
Okay.
remarriage, and they did. It's called a remarriage clause.
Hmm.
And men did that quite often. And I bet with the support of their wives, because I'm sure everyone was nervous. The fear was the stepfather. That's what's ironic. And all the prejudice goes towards the stepmother, but the real danger was the stepfather and financial danger, you
Mhm.
know? And the stepmother, as it became more important that this emotional, kind of child-centered family be key to class. I mean, if you're a middle class person, that's the kind of family you're supposed to have, a white
Right.
middle class person. So therefore, the mother's role becomes much more important over time. And she, in fact, they, as you know today, it's very often women get custody of children. That wasn't the case prior to this time period. The men would get custody. So because it was through a patriarchal line. So it's really kind of interesting how it's shifted, but that all
Hmm.
the prejudice was there, but really all the danger was on the other side. Then over time, a woman had to be such a good parent. And then you can imagine the prejudice made a little more sense, that if you were wicked, you know,
Mhm.
that would be terrible, for your stepkids, But Cinderella is still alive and well.
Oh yeah.
And,
Yeah.
movies, everybody, all the kids know what it is, you know, and
Yeah.
so and there isn't a stepfather equivalent. There's very few, popular culture versions of that. I found some stuff, some films that are terrifying,
Mhm.
murderous, insane stepfathers, but
Yeah. Well,
still, and
stepmothers
that
too.
that's what it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a physical thing. Now people are worried about stepfathers abusing
Yeah.
kids,
Mm, yeah.
but not taking their money.
Yeah.
Right.
In the old days, it was the money they were worried about.
A
Hmm.
different fear.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But it's really not an easy. Well, you guys have managed it, but it's not an easy gig, right?
Right.
No, it's not.
Still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Wow.
you really got to be focused on the children. That's the whole thing.
It's interesting how the dynamics have shifted like completely from one end to the other.
I
And
know.
then we're seeing it kind of go back. Like the
Mm-hmm.
father always got the kids, and then there was a time when the mother always got the kids, and now we're kind of seeing a shift back the other way,
Yeah,
where I don't know that I'd say it's probably more equal ground now, maybe
I
close.
agree.
Hmm.
Um,
Uh,
so
Yeah,
that's really interesting though.
Yeah.
isn't it?
It
Yeah, and
is.
I'm not sure what it's going to mean. With the kids shuffling back and forth, it's hard. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, because
And
back in
to
the day, they didn't do that.
Well, otherwise, the divorce was so rare. It was hard to get. That doesn't mean people were happy. No, no, no. They just couldn't legally get their divorces because they were very expensive and difficult to get. So what they did was they left.
Hmm.
So if you're in colony X and you go to colony Y and get a new wife, no one knows. And you do have bigamy as a problem for
Yeah.
some people wouldn't marry sailors because they just assumed they had wives in every port
Yeah.
because they don't share records. Every
Right.
colony is separate.
Yeah.
So it was just desertion, you know,
Wow.
and they just disappeared. And then after 7 years, if you're a woman left alone, you could declare him legally dead and then remarry. But
Hmm.
7 years.
Wow. That's a
So
long time being a
it's
woman trying to raise
you
kids.
bet. You bet. At a
because
time where
yeah,
women couldn't
Maybe
make
that's
money like that.
maybe that's a
right.
7 year itch.
That's where that comes from, right?
Yeah, that would have to be hard. Just thinking about because back in the day, well, I mean, now it takes a team, but it
Oh
is
yeah.
easier for one individual to have a family, a single parent family.
Yeah.
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 Well, I don't know. A couple years ago it was. It's about
Yeah.
15 years ago. Yeah.
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 I think single parenthood has always been hard.
Yeah.
I think now we're a little more isolated and nuclear in ways that they weren't in the 18th century. I mean, you have small towns, people know each other, you know your neighbors. There's a lot more help and support.
Hmm.
Um, I wish we did that more
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
helped families.
That's interesting.
Because
I think that's where it comes, people say it takes a village.
yes,
I don't, I understand the sentiment. I just don't think that happens much anymore.
I agree.
Yeah,
It
you on your
worries me.
own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember being a single parent and having suddenly to get diapers. And what am I going to do? Wake up the baby and yeah, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Or you call your neighbor and help me get diapers. I mean, those kinds of emergency things. And pretty soon, female friends were my lifesaver. They were the
Yeah.
ones that would come to my aid and really made all the difference for me, you
Hmm.
know. So, and I think it's the same then. I mean, I'm finding like widows all they have one in almost many little towns and even some cities had areas called Widows Row,
Hmm.
and you'd have a street all full of single
Uh,
women. And I always think that is the support street. That's the place you want to be.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a community of support right there.
I think it is. I think it is. I think there's no way that's not the case.
That's awesome.
And yeah,
I like
Stay
it.
off that road.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about you growing up as a step kid. How old were you when your parents split up, got divorced?
6.
Okay, so you were fairly
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, I was young. And my mother never remarried, but my dad did.
Okay.
And it wasn't easy.
I bet your mom had
Um,
custody.
yes. And I didn't see my father hardly at all. I mean, I think it was pretty common in my generation for men to just walk away.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he did. And so we went to live with my grandparents. And my mother was not very well and couldn't really support us.
Yeah.
So we depended on them, and that was not a great household. And so it was a tough upbringing, I would say. And I was determined when I got older that I wouldn't do that. I would never be in that situation. Well, you can't always decide.
Yeah.
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 Uh, and life happens. And then but at least it was one of those kinds of things where you say, well, I'm not going to do what they did.
Right. Right.
And I came to what you guys have already come to, which is this Nacho idea is great. That is exactly right.
Well,
It's
thank you.
perfect. Yes. And I was 6-year-old knowing that,
Yeah.
thinking, don't do that. I have a
Yeah.
mother. Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
So, did you have step siblings?
I had a half brother
Okay.
who was, well, not half brother. Actually, he's adopted by my stepmother. So, but
Okay.
he was, I guess, my stepbrother.
Hmm.
But I rarely saw him. I had 2 sisters.
Okay.
And so we were a threesome. We kind of worked together. Sometimes better, sometimes not so good.
Mhm.
Um, Went very different ways. We did kind of what a lot of kids do in troubled families. You end up in kind of the troubled one, the good girl, which I was, and
Unless we
you
ask your
know,
sisters.
yes, indeed,
Yeah. Where's your
and
sisters to verify that?
yeah, well, they would agree. I always got the straight A's, always did that, and then we have the crazy one, and that's kind of what we did, and divided and went our crazy ways. I mean,
Yeah.
as adults, I'm very close to my younger sister as
Yeah.
an adult. Yeah,
Sounds like
but
your sister.
we both ended up with divorces and the same having to deal with it again.
Yeah.
So what did you, when you found out you were going to have to get divorced, however that happened, what was that like? Like, because you've looked at that through your whole life saying, I'm not going to be this.
You're like, dang it,
I'm,
Lisa. Dang it.
I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to avoid it at all cost. What was that day like?
Well, if someone's going to leave you, you can't stop them.
No.
You
Right.
have no control, you know.
Yeah.
And my son was 6 months old,
Oh, oh,
and so I had a lot to struggle with.
wow.
And you know, but he was again kind of my savior, you know,
Hmm.
um, knowing that he was there every day and there was a reason to get out of bed, you know.
Hmm.
And luckily, I had my job, which I had for all those years. I was already a professor and able to support myself. And my ex was had enough money that he paid support.
Good.
So we managed. I think if I was honestly, I don't know if you know this, professors don't make much.
Yeah.
So if it was just me, it would have been really hard
Hmm.
to afford daycare and all the things I had to do. But I managed, you know, I one foot in front of the other, baby, you know,
Yeah.
You do what you
until it
have to
gets
do.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remarried. I should tell you the happy ending. I
Yeah.
remarried when my son was about 5.
Okay.
And I've been married 30 years to my
Congratulations.
second husband. Yep. And he had no kids.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
He came in totally naive.
I've been married on and off for about 30 years.
There you go. I always thought I should count them. I got those 9 years. Don't they count? Okay. But they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but he's been a wonderful stepdad. But we did it exactly as I knew a 6-year-old self knew, you know, just be his friend. Just be his friend.
Yeah.
And that's what they still are. He liked him. My son liked my husband before I did. So,
Really?
Mhm.
oh yeah, he just warmed to him immediately. I
Yeah,
kept trying to fix up my husband with friends. So
we always joked
eventually caught
about
on.
how if something happened to me that Jackson wouldn't tell his dad, but he would stay with David.
I think there's something to be said for that. It was
Exactly.
kind of like, yo, mom, over here. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
sometimes kids have good instincts.
was your first husband involved in your son's life?
Yes.
Okay.
He would, you know, every few weeks he would visit and he still does. And I'm really glad about that because he remarried and had a couple children that my son is very close to.
Oh, awesome.
And I was not able to have more children. And so I'm very thankful that he's got siblings
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they were in each other's weddings and he has that. And
Mhm.
so I'm glad for that. And I made really sure to be the good human being and to be kind to his new wife. I mean, you know, because I saw that go down really badly. You know,
Mhm.
I said, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you
You
don't
know,
want to anger the person that is around your kid as
they're
a
taking care.
quote,
Exactly.
quote, parental figure. Yeah.
You bet, and do everything I could to get along. And that was what my job was. What
Mhm.
was the best thing for my son?
Right.
And the best thing for my son was everyone to get along,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so that's what I determined to do, you know? And not that it was easy. You know, it's not easy.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, tell us a story about a time that, because I know it happened, that
Mhm.
your husband came to you and said, you are not a strict enough parent on little Johnny, or I don't
Yeah,
like the way that you're parenting him. You're going to tell me no.
I'm going to tell you no. No, I never got that. I never got my husband actually, my ex-husband is very supportive of my parenting.
No, not your ex-husband, your
My
current.
Current.
present husband. Oh,
Yeah. Like
my
your,
present husband has was brought up differently, I'd say. You're right. I don't think it was ever like that though. It was more like we had very different views.
Hmm.
And
he
but
tolerated
because we said from the beginning, this is about friendship, not fatherhood, you know.
it. Mhm.
Yeah.
And once you put it in that place, then that doesn't have to be his role. I didn't ask him to do that, you
Right.
know.
Hmm.
I'll handle it. It'll be all right. I got it, you know. And yeah, but he was brought up, I think, by, kind of, he's a blue collar guy, brought up by blue collar people. And yeah, they were a little stricter, let's put it lightly,
Hmm.
than I am. And,
Be like,
but
I'd
over
tear his
time,
tail up, Lisa. If he was my
oh
kid, I'd
boy,
tear him up.
not quite that, but
Now he'd probably be passive aggressive and be like, "Well, you get what you got when you do stuff like
more like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what'd you
What? Yeah,
expect?
what did you expect? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
you
yeah,
brought this on
yeah,
yourself, Lisa.
yeah,
Call me
yeah.
if you need me.
So did you
But it
have the
was
evil stepmother? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
me. Did I have one?
Yeah.
I had a troubled stepmother, I'd say. She wasn't, mothering and towards me. She was
Now there's
pretty,
a difference in not being mothering towards you and not parenting you, but being there
no,
as a quote quote aunt type figure.
no,
No.
I would say not.
She
No,
just did not
it
like y'all.
wasn't a good relationship. No,
Yeah.
we didn't see her very often, and she was jealous of us,
Yeah.
which is sad.
It is. We see that all the time. And
Yeah,
you'll
I
see
bet.
step parents get mad that their partner is spending time with
I
their
know,
kid
but there
and
were
not
kids.
including them. Honey, that's a break for you.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah,
But number two, they need that time.
Or
of course. I
the funnier part is when you were, for example, dating this person, you're like, "Oh my gosh, he's such a good dad. He spends so much time with his kids." And then when
Mm.
you get married to him, you're like, "Oh my God, he spends so much time with his kids."
Yeah.
yeah. What about me? It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you need to put your needs aside a little bit there.
Yeah.
It's just silly. It was silly.
Or
And
even
but
the step kid sitting beside us. The kid
mm,
hadn't seen their bio parent for a week, probably, if not longer.
Yeah.
Let the
hmm
kid sit beside them. They got two
hmm
sides.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't get it. I mean, it's an immature response, I think. These are kids, and let's be the grown-ups. Who are the grown-ups in the room here?
Right.
Um, and that's kind of what you have to do. But yeah, so she was that way, and that was hard. And when she passed away, I got to know my dad a little more. That's really what it came down to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she
And
kept you from having a relationship with your
yeah,
dad.
pretty much. But then it was his too choice, right?
Right. Right. It's his choice. But if she would not have had any input versus negative input, it would have,
hmm
you'd have had a better relationship.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
And
Because it was
so
three
yeah,
girls, right?
yeah,
She's like, oh, heck no, you are not bringing those three girls here. And
Hmm.
yeah. She did not know the Nacho at all. She kept trying to be the mom, and that was part of the problem.
Mhm.
So yeah, she was a damaged person. So yeah, so it wasn't good.
Hmm.
I mean, the only good I can say is I learned again negative lessons.
Yeah.
And I was little, and I said, I don't want to ever do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm almost taking notes almost about, okay, let's do the 180 degree. One person once told me that's what you do. You either copy or you do 180 degree and go the
Right.
other direction.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think people do. And I tried to do the 180 degree.
I think
What
people
do
do
I
that in
want different?
relationships.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
I was in this type of relationship and I want something that is completely opposite of that, which
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes is just as troubling. It's just troubling the other direction. Or
Yeah,
you go right back to what you were familiar with, which
of
also
course,
may not be good.
Hmm.
which
Um,
often isn't good.
right,
I
right.
mean, breaking type.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
I always pick that, so maybe I shouldn't, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Mine
I
was
think,
180.
yeah,
In a good
yeah,
way,
Oh
but
yeah. It's like this is
that's a
what
compliment, I think.
yeah.
I mean, that could have been like
Mhm.
questionable in
No,
place.
But you
yeah.
have to think about why these things keep going badly, and then you start to think, well, maybe they call it the picker's broken. Your picker's broken.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
I say that often. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for me, it was about I don't know about you, I had a problem trying to figure out like what role did I play in the divorce? And I'm not talking
hmm
about from a surface level, like deeper than that. Because typically when people get divorced, it's probably not about the actual thing they got divorced about. It's usually something a little deeper than that.
Hmm.
So I tried to spend time figuring that out. And of course, trying to also figure out the new role. I was married for, I think, 12 years the first time. So it was enough time for me to develop habits. And then, now I'm not in that role of being a husband anymore. And what does that look like? And I'm not a full-time dad anymore now. Now I'm a part-time dad. What does that look like? It was just,
Hmm.
I mean, I think for a couple of years, I was a mess. I was just a
I
mess.
still are.
Yeah. I'm a good mess now. I was a bad mess then. It was like, I mean, I look back on that time and it wasn't me. It was me searching for everything, trying to figure
Mm.
out who am I now and what is my
Mm.
role in everything now. It's almost like, where do I
Hmm.
even exist anymore? It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a bad time. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I got through it. And then looking back on it, I was like,
Mm.
that was, I was not the person that I like my normal self. I was somebody different.
Mhm.
I
So,
think divorce is worse than death.
oh
I
yeah.
Yeah,
think
because the
it's
person's still there.
excruciating. I know it's excruciating. At least it was for me. I think it took me 2 years before I started feeling normal again.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, no, I think it's a really hard thing to do, and maybe the hardest thing I've ever done.
Hmm.
So,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think
Being a
people,
stepmom is my hardest thing I've ever done.
oh yes, oh yes. I cannot stress enough how everything is stacked against you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And you have to overcome a lot that has nothing to do with you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
culture. It's the culture
Yep.
that is already, you're a stepmother. Oh, that you mean people ought to say it in their voice. Well, this is
Hmm.
my stepmother. It's like, what? It might be a nice woman for all you know. You
It's
know?
my stupid stepmother.
Oh no, no, I
Yeah,
mean, it's such a negativity to it to this
it
day.
is. But
And
stepdads, if the stepdad
oh, they're
takes,
the good guys.
yeah, takes little Johnny to school, it's like, yeah, man,
Oh,
you deserve an award.
I think so.
exactly, exactly. Aren't you the best,
Yeah. You swooped in and
Uh,
saved that family.
Yeah,
exactly, exactly right. It's
yeah.
just, I mean, that's what struck me more than anything. And I'd never been a stepmother, but I read all this stuff and I thought, my God, there is no way you can get, you can't win. This is impossibly hard,
Yeah.
you
The
Yeah.
know?
bad thing about that is there are some men out there that have that mentality that I did you a favor by, marrying you, and therefore you're gonna have this role where you're serving me, basically. You know what I'm saying? That's basically what it ends up like. Like
Delusional.
I expect you to do all this stuff, and I'm just going to go and work 9 to 5, and I'm come on, prop my feet up and do nothing.
And play games.
And I'm like, wait a minute, this is I like looking at it like it's a business arrangement. Like, look, we're running a
Amen.
business here. The business is the family, and there are things that
Hmm.
have to get done in order for this business to flourish, and
Hmm.
it takes two. And
Yes.
so,
Partnership, baby. It's about
exactly,
partnership.
that's right. A partner is somebody who's hand in hand. It's like I don't want you to walk in front of me. I don't want you to walk behind me. I want you to walk beside me.
Hmm. That's the only way it works.
And you
Yep,
might not always
You know,
agree with the where you are at that step of what each person wants to do, but the goal's the same.
yep,
that's right. And
yep.
and that's exactly the family is the goal, and I think that is true. I think that the traditional roles for women, the ones we think of today, are mostly from really a very rare time in the 1950s, when people were having these, perfect nuclear families, in the suburbs. This was not ever normal. Women always worked outside the
Mhm.
home. And so this is really just a slice of the middle class. And we kind of look at this back, oh, it was so much better then. And it's like, this is not even real. And besides that, it wasn't better for those of us who kind of lived there during that period.
Right.
It was very hard. And there were a lot of divorces, and women were miserable.
Mhm.
And so this is the thing that we don't want to go back there. We want to create something new,
Right.
that works for everybody.
Right.
And the only way to do that is for men to step up and really be involved in parenting, you know. And I mean, I think women working is really important for all kinds of reasons, not just
Right.
financial, to have
For their
something other,
sanity.
exactly, something other than the husband and kids to think about all day.
Yes.
And support that, and but I think that's the next generations to do in some ways, because the only way to do that and do it well, is to have, support of both workers, maybe even flex schedules, allow families to exist, allow people
Right.
to have, maternity leave, paternity leave, to really allow for a family. Family needs flexibility. 9 to 5 doesn't work. You need to have some kind of flexibility. And women are paid less still in this culture than men. So
Yeah.
often what happens, if you get a lot of equality, the child comes in and then the woman quits because I make less. Well, you make less because the whole thing is structurally wrong,
Hmm.
So
I
until we
think
get
that the United States has the worst maternity policy
it is pretty
compared to
horrible.
other countries. It's crazy. It's horrible.
It's crazy.
But I think there should be like step maternal leave.
That would be
Like,
great.
you're going to be a stepmom. We know this is going to be hard. Here is 6 months paid off while you work on this and join the Nacho Kids Academy.
There
Yeah.
you
Read
go.
Lisa's book.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe caregiver leave,
Yeah.
Anybody who's caring for those babies
Yeah.
needs time,
Well, Lori and I
And
have actually talked about how companies should have like the Nacho Kids Academy and things like that be part of like a benefits package,
Mhm.
especially
yeah,
for step families. It's like give them something
that'd
that
be
can
great.
help them
Right.
because if their home life is good, their work life will be good.
Exactly. And there's so many of them.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So many of them.
And a
So
lot of
it's
people don't talk about it. They don't want to air their dirty laundry.
well, they think it's dirty, but we got to make it undirty,
Hmm.
Yeah.
We got to normalize it. This is normal family life.
Yeah.
This
Hmm.
is everywhere. This is half of the population. I mean, so many people, if you ask them if they have any connection to a step family, they all do. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very common. And so it's something we all should just embrace and support, you
Yeah.
know.
It's very
And
common, and yet nobody wants to talk about it.
Hmm.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. When I wrote this book, I really wanted people like you guys to read it. I wanted step families to read it. I said,
Hmm.
how do I get this out to the step families,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there were a few groups, supporting step families, but not many,
Right. Right.
And so I'm glad you guys are doing this. I mean, it sounds like you have a following, and you're really getting out there. And I just think we have to make it not a bad thing and
Right.
normalize it.
Like therapy or, yeah, counseling.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely essential. And who knows, it's like having a child. They don't come with a manual, you
Yeah.
know, and you don't know what you're doing. Of course, you don't know what you're doing. You never did it before,
Right.
Yeah.
So let's have some friends that have and support groups. We know how to do this,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
let me ask your thought on the phrase blended families versus step families.
Mm.
Here
Well, I
in the
think,
past, I don't know, decade, we'd say, is people started using blended family because step family has such a negative
yep.
connotation.
Hmm.
Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that one of the problems that people have with, and I get it, is that blended makes it sound like it's effortless, and it's not. It's really
No,
hard,
no, no.
right?
It's
And
like a
that's the
smoothie.
only,
Yeah, you're getting
yeah,
chopped up by the blades.
It's a blended
we'll
smoothie.
just wiggle it together and it'll be great,
Right.
And it is not that way.
And I
So
think
it's
it
all,
makes people feel like they're failures when they don't feel blended.
yeah, exactly.
And from my research, and my research is Google, um, blended families was actually a mixed race couple in the beginning.
Mm,
That was the term that they used for that
mm,
until it started, replacing step families.
mm. I didn't hear that, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's possible. It
Hmm.
doesn't make it, but it doesn't get to the angst, the difficulty
Yeah.
Right.
thing. And it may be, hard blended. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something that says something that I recognize this is not easy,
Right.
Pureed.
because yeah, you don't just suddenly, we're together like the Brady Bunch,
Yeah.
This is
Well, we
not
figured
real.
out if everybody had an Alice, life would
Of
be great.
course, I
Yeah.
know.
Alice takes the heat off of the
I
step
would have
parent.
loved to have an Alice. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
in a
that's
great
the
big house in California, wherever. Oh man, good for you.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
A
just
lot of
even
people don't
somebody
get
to tell the
that.
kids what to do, you know?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
Mhm.
exactly. And make the lunches, and oh, that sounds wonderful.
Make them do their
Yeah,
homework. Yeah.
makes all the difference.
Alice saved that family.
Oh, you are so right.
I
You are
know.
so right.
Yep. And the Jetsons had Rosie.
That's
Yeah.
right. The Jetsons had Rosie. It's not fair.
I know. Missing out.
And dogs that didn't shed.
I know. Man. So what was something that struck you as very interesting you didn't expect to find when you did your research for your book?
I didn't expect that whole stuff. I don't know if you got to that. Good stepmothers, how they really got to the point where how are we going to ever integrate these step families into this new sentimental family idea, this loving family? And then there's this whole literature that came out about how, number one, to be a good stepmother, and secondly, sort of teaching stepmothers how to be good and having stepchildren behave better towards their stepmothers, and real educational effort in the 19th century.
Is this
I
when they
blew
were
my
doing
mind.
lobotomies with the ice pick?
Yeah, I wonder if that was part of it, but but of course it's all the woman's responsibility to do everything, right? To
Hmm.
learn how to be a good, you
Mhm.
know. But and then this kind of idea of sort of sainted mothers that are, floating around. I mean, that must be very difficult, And some of these stories, they're literally floating around as a ghost, still
Yes.
there, like, oh my God.
Yeah,
So
because if you are in a blended relationship or a step family, due to someone being a widow or widower, you're competing with a ghost.
that's right.
And
Whereas they're
ghosts never
idealized.
made mistakes in their life.
Exactly. They're
Yep.
idealized.
Yep.
And I think that surprised the heck out of me. That they were so disturbed about the problem that they decided they need to do some education. And
Huh.
I didn't expect to find that. And I
Interesting.
didn't expect to find the evil stepfather, the Silas Dean story that I have in there of this really evil stepfather.
Yeah.
Took all their money and did it systematically for years. And I gave a presentation somewhere where they have a house that has been preserved that was his. And the people from that house came and they were not happy with what I had to say. I was just based on what's there. And they came up and said, we really love him. And I'm like, okay, but he was bad. I'm sorry.
When they say we really love him, they mean like the ghost that still lives there,
I
or
may, or just
The
because they're taking
idea.
care of his house, and
yeah.
he was a revolutionary leader, and that was also problematic, but it was really problematic, the stepfather thing. He just took it all.
Yeah.
And even the courts admitted it all was taken by him. It's just clear as a bell in the papers.
But it was legal, right?
Well, no, he was a lawyer.
Eh.
And what he did is he got a widow pregnant.
Hmm.
And she was a rich widow. He got her pregnant. They got married, and
Ah,
then it began. And he slowly started using up the estate for his own good.
yeah.
And it was, years of buying properties in his own name and hiding things. And the story is awful because this woman, poor woman's on her or on her deathbed,
Her
and she's
step
right.
bed is about the same.
Deathbed,
Step
yeah,
bed, yeah.
yeah, holding on to these deeds, these properties, and saying, don't give these to anybody, to the poor young daughter that's there. And she dies. She's literally a corpse in the house. And he goes up to the daughter and says, so where's the papers? And she trusted him as her stepfather, and she gave him all the papers. And he just took the whole shooting match.
Hmm.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I was shocked by that story, that I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, it's getting worse and worse, till the end. And I thought, wow, So, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to find the kind of embezzlement that you could do with a widow. You could slowly build the estate and how to do it. But he
Yeah.
was smart and he was able to do it.
And
And
nowadays
then
you can do
the
it from
paper
a
trail.
computer in Nigeria.
Yeah, exactly. That's who it was. That's who it was. But the paper trails are rare, in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, here is a paper trail.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to show this is how it was done. If you wanted to be really awful as a stepfather, this is how it was done.
Yeah.
So that surprised me too, that I could actually uncover such a story.
So do you
So
think back in the day that men had stepdads still had the same grandioso effect on people of, oh, you're the best for taking care of these kids, even
yes,
though they were using the money of the woman?
yes.
It's like you're the
No, I
best,
think
dad.
I think you're exactly right. You've done so well. And in fact, he went on and on about how great he was and
Yeah.
how he had done so well for these children and how dare they, you know, question him
Yeah,
and so on and so forth.
they'd live under a bridge if it wasn't for him.
Ungrateful.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And there's
Yeah.
something to be said for that. I mean, a widow could not get a job that would support her husband or her kids in any way in the 18th century, like a
Yeah.
man could.
Yeah.
And yeah, she either needed money or she also could have an older son step into the position of father of the family, in effect, and run a farm, for example.
Oh,
And then
okay.
she could manage,
Mhm.
without getting remarried. And they were
Because
very afraid.
because he
Yeah.
would be bringing in the money.
Yeah, he would be able to handle the farm or do some kind of
Yeah.
income. And then what they do is sometimes they'd leave a house to somebody, but they also would leave the widow in the house. So here, you can have this house, son, but you know, it comes with widow, and a third
Comes without
goes
my
to her.
gene.
Yeah. And they write like, oh, she has the right to and from the privy, you know, I mean, to the bathroom,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, and it's like, oh my God, you know, these detailed descriptions, but they usually were about giving her a portion of what the farm would produce, enough to really support herself.
Huh.
So, but he had to deal with mom in the house, which was not normalized. A lot of people think about the past as these big extended families in a house. That's not what it was. They were mostly nuclear
Hmm.
and just mom, dad, and the kids, and some servants or enslaved people. And so that wouldn't be great for any person to have the mom in the house. That was not ideal.
Did you run into any
So
stories about, well, I'll tell you what I know a little bit of my family history that there were some that were divorced, had kids, couldn't get jobs, and they had to turn to prostitution often in
oh
order to
yeah,
support their
it's
family
one
and
thing a
put
woman
food
can
on the
do.
table. Yeah. Did you find any stories similar to that?
Well, there are stories like that. I didn't write about them, but I think that is absolutely easy to find. Um, I think prostitution is the oldest profession and is one that women have used their bodies for years in order to support themselves and their kids. It's one of the few ways you could make money. You know, you could be a washerwoman, you could be a seamstress, you could run a boarding house if you were really wealthy. You had a house, you
But
could
you were gonna
rent
get
out
more money
rooms.
being a prostitute.
You bet. But
Hmm.
then, of course, you died in those days. You know, you
To
can
run a brothel.
imagine. Yeah. But you get pregnant, you have VD, you have all the things that went
Yeah.
with that, and so it was never a good gig.
Do you,
And
do you realize that you just told everybody in the world that your
I didn't say
relatives
what
were
size it
prostitutes?
was. Yes. Yes. Look, I know I got some crazy past.
yeah, that's a desperate woman. That's a
Yeah.
desperate woman. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
what you really have is a desperate woman
Well,
Yeah.
and I tell
trying to
you
feed
what,
herself.
yeah, it takes a strong woman.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
No.
I think, and the stories are horrific for the past from today, but in the past it was so much worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really a desperate decision to do that.
Mhm.
But you know, there were so few choices. Women didn't have choices. You could say I found some women in Philadelphia and for another project doing things like this. They list as their occupation rocks a cradle,
Huh.
Hmm.
or they'd say sews a little. And they would just like people on the street selling things out of tables, you know, that kind of idea, like they do today. You can
Mhm.
find people, you know, just desperately selling pastries or whatever they can make at home. I mean,
Right.
it's that kind of thing, or you know, and yeah, they are so marginal. Many of them depend on what they would call outdoor relief, which would be like a little bit of firewood, maybe, which was the equivalent of oil in our time period. It kept you warm, you know.
Right.
Mm.
And they would I would call the way my widow's book, I talk about how they they'd have a patchwork quilt of things they put together to be able to survive. And that would be one of the things they would do. They would do that, and then they'd have the kids, all the kids working, very young, and take in all kinds of people into this very small space, and it was pretty sad,
Yeah.
washerwoman, you go wash other people's clothes. This was a big thing
Right.
before, people were able to get
You need a
washing
washerwoman.
machines. I know.
I
Oh yeah, man, that was hard work.
need a lot of women in here.
Yeah.
You need a lot of women to run this world. That is
Yeah.
for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we know you were talking about the husband working like back in the 50s and things like that, and
Mhm.
women kind of staying home. I may be wrong in this, but I think I read somewhere that it was around the 40s or 50s where the 40-hour work week really started happening. Before that, it was actually a lot more work than that.
Absolutely. I mean,
But
it's all unions. Unions have done that for us.
Yeah, like
Has
the
made
40-hour
that
work week.
happen.
There used to the work week used to be a lot more
it
than
used to
40
be they
hours.
like the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
What
then,
happened in World War II is that women went into the workforce because men were gone.
mhm,
Mhm.
And then when men came back, they were told, no, men are back. You can leave now. And many of them lost their jobs. And they were to go back home and get married and do that kind of thing. And many of them didn't want to. They liked working. So it was a weird kind of expansion of time. Wars are these expansion of time when women are working in unusual places, like bomb factories. And
Yeah.
suddenly, they're back home.
Rosie the
Um,
Riveter.
Yeah.
exactly, Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
And this was right after Rosie,
Yeah.
and so get home, and it was a good time economically in this country. So people's economics were good. People coming home had the GI Bill.
Mhm.
It was a time of prosperity, and so lots of people moved into the middle class. You could live on one income, which does not exist anymore,
Mm-mm.
and that was the family wage idea. And then you could afford to actually have a woman stay home with kids.
Right.
That was a brand new thing. So it's a really historical blip, which people really harken back to.
Mhm.
I like more the idea of a farm family, and people
Mm.
working together,
Yeah.
and community working
Yeah.
together.
My
Yeah.
cousin has a homestead in
Oh yeah,
near Greenville somewhere. I don't know exactly where. I can't remember. And we haven't been yet, but I'm like, that's what we all need to do. Just go live around everybody.
that's right.
The
Oh my
compound.
God,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you'd
Yeah.
have help all the time,
Mm.
and the
Yeah.
kids would run amok together, you
Mhm.
know. I mean, that sounds so perfect to me. Some people I know do these things called intentional communities. I mean, you've heard of these multi-generational folks living
Mhm.
in purposeful places, and I have older friends that
Yeah.
did babysit these ones, and the kids come over and help them with home repair, and so it all kinds of evens out.
Yeah. So you're not
Yeah.
driving an hour to go help somebody fix something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think
I
that's
hope
I think that's what community should look like, and
I
especially
know.
your family community. So often I think that when kids turn 18 or whatever, it's like we're ready to just get rid of them, and they move way away, or they don't want to have
Well,
anything to do with their family.
that's
But
our country is so big.
I know,
If you were in
yeah,
Germany, they just moved down the street.
right,
But here they're in
yeah,
California. Oh my God, they're across, thousands of miles. And
yeah.
once you get on a plane, you're on a plane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
And
interesting that today I was in a presentation and they were talking about the homeless problem that we have in our area, which it's a nationwide problem, but
mhm,
in our area they were talking about it, and they do a count every year. They actually go out and find these people, and they
mhm,
count how many they are and do some
mhm.
demographics. And it was interesting because they said that it was like um, I can't remember the exact numbers, but basically it was like 48% of them were white, and 50% were black, and then 2% were other, which
Oh,
I don't know what that is, but I'm
yeah.
just going to assume it's Latino.
Yeah.
And I was actually sitting between African American on one side and Latino on the other side of me. So I turned to the Latino guy and I was like, why is there only 2% of, potentially Latinos? And he's like, because
I know what he
Latinos,
said.
he says Latinos won't let each
That's
other
right.
be homeless.
Yeah.
It won't
That's right.
happen.
Yep.
Whereas apparently everybody else don't mind doing that. There's
Hmm.
there's more community and more family within the Latino community.
There
They
it
take
is.
care of their families.
Yeah, they take care
There
of
it is.
themselves. And he told me, he's like, you will never go to a home. You will die in the house or in the bed that live in. They're
I
not.
need to change to Latino really quick.
But I
Hmm.
just thought that was interesting.
Yep.
That
Well,
you.
in the 18th century, if you had poor people, what you did is you put them in someone's house and then you pay them to take care of them.
Hmm,
Hmm.
It wasn't until the beginning of the 19th century that they created what they call asylums, large almshouses, where they'd keep these folks that were poor and make them work. Many of them worked doing very menial things and very crowded, and people died, and you can imagine how horrible it could be. But before then, it was considered this was our responsibility, the town's responsibility to take care of the poor.
hmm.
And can you imagine? So different than today,
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Hmm.
I said something else. There was somebody else at my table, and he's a pastor, and they were talking about the homeless problem. And I said, "Well, what are the churches in this area doing about that?" And he looked at me. He said, "We're praying for them." I'm like, "Come on, man."
You can't eat prayers.
I mean,
I
prayers are the
mean,
best thing you can do, but as a church,
you can even
Keep
do more than
moving.
that.
you
Yeah.
have a better
Which
reach.
he
Yeah.
was he was somewhat,
Joking.
tongue in
Yeah.
cheek joking, because there are churches that
Yeah,
that do step up.
of
But
course. Right.
overall, my comment was that we've got a small community. There's literally a church on every corner. We shouldn't have a problem funding things like warming centers and cooling
Hmm.
centers and soup kitchens.
Soup
There shouldn't be a
kitchens.
problem funding that stuff if
That's right.
just the church community would pull together. Uh,
I agree.
but
I
anyway.
agree. I agree.
And two, I know there is a homeless guy in Lancaster that you've told me before.
He's
He
homeless by
has he
choice.
is homeless by choice. He has
Yeah.
Hmm.
family, but he does not
Hmm.
want to live with them.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. I
That's
talked
right.
to him one
Well,
time years ago, and he said, I don't have to worry about house payments, car payments. He just goes down
mm,
this whole list of all the things that,
mhm,
we have to worry about and make sure we're working our tails off to pay for. He's like, I don't have any of
mhm.
those problems.
Yeah, but he got to figure out where to
I
sleep,
know.
what
I'm
to
like,
eat, where to
yeah,
use the
but
bathroom.
I think you're taking it to the extreme there, buddy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, some people are mentally ill too, and we
Mm,
deinstitutionalize people. We closed a lot of institutions, but we didn't provide anything on the other side, and so
yeah.
many of those people had nowhere to go.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
saw a
And
lot of that when we were in Denver. Wasn't it Denver
mhm,
more so?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You're right though. They closed a lot of these, quote unquote, insane asylums and just put these people out on the street.
I know. Now, what do you expect is going to happen? They're going to stop taking their meds, and the whole thing is going to collapse. Yeah, yeah, something's
It's
really
nice
wrong.
knowing you. Bye. Good luck.
Yeah,
Yeah, good luck on that.
yeah.
I
You'll be
never thought
Yeah.
about that.
you'll be a great
Mm,
stepmom.
yes.
They're going to write a
No
book about
problem.
you.
There you go.
How does stepmoms originate? When they let people out of the insane
The
asylums.
asylum. Yeah, right, right.
That's probably why they
Many
were.
of them are in
Yeah.
the insane asylum. Yeah,
I tell you
This is our
what.
stepfamily wing.
Yeah.
right.
It's the whole hospital.
Exactly.
And I know we're
Exactly.
joking about that, but it's true about the depression and the
Oh,
anxiety and
absolutely.
even the suicidal ideation type things that
Yeah,
step parents go
absolutely.
through. Yeah.
It's a very hard job, and there's very little support. And as you say, we don't talk about it.
Hmm.
And I'm just so glad you guys do, because there needs to be more talking about it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
About what
supporting
really
each other.
happens, not
I
just
know.
rainbow
I
unicorn
know.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't knock
yeah.
your
And,
kids
and
after
then
dark.
ask them, how was it for you? And get advice. I mean, we have support groups for everything in the world. Why can't we do this?
Hmm.
I just don't get it. But
Yeah.
I would have liked to have had you guys around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we would like to have had us around before we went through
Yeah.
everything too.
I bet. I
Yeah.
bet. I bet.
Yep.
And all I had was a child's eye view. I'd been through it.
Right.
And so I knew what the adults had done wrong
Right.
in a weird way. And out of the whole divorce, I was the only one that had any familiarity with divorce. And it was turned out to be really useful
Yeah.
to know what that little 6-year-old wanted and needed. you know?
Hmm.
And it's funny
And
that you brought that up because I've always said that I have a type of guilty parent syndrome for my son that
mm,
comes from how I was raised.
mm,
Like I wanted my relationship with him to be completely different than my relationship with my mom.
mm-hmm,
And I was going to make
mm-hmm,
sure that happened.
mm-hmm.
And so when you said that, it made me think it's from a child's perspective that's where that's coming from because I
Absolutely.
remember being 8 years old and the unkind words that were said and
Hmm.
feeling like that you're a burden and all that stuff. So yeah,
You knew it wasn't right. You knew.
right.
You with little girls
I
saying
need
that
my
ain't
mama
right.
with me.
I did. But some people just repeat the pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's easier to do that actually.
Yeah,
Just
because it
goes
becomes your
around.
home, like your shell. If you're a little turtle, it becomes your shell. Even though
Yeah,
it's bad, it's what you're comfortable knowing.
no doubt. And
Hmm.
I think the only way I got out of that was a lot of work. I had to read a lot, I had therapy, a lot of things to make me break that because that's where everyone goes to what they know. And I tried not to parent. I used to call it as a knee-jerk parent. So what does my instinct say? That ain't right. Let me think of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Instinct's bad, and try to figure out what other people were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
I study, and that's what I do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I
We call
studied
that
that too.
the reactive step parent. You don't want to react, you gotta
Yes,
respond.
Yeah.
exactly.
Responding takes more thought, and you step back a little bit and you
That's right.
think about it.
And responding has
That's right.
less emotion.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
As
Get
you
that anger
said,
out
knee
of the
jerk.
way.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Use your brain, not your anger,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
that's hard.
It
You know,
is. Especially
I
when
also
you're
used to spend a
frustrated.
lot of, I used to spend a lot of time watching other parents too. I have to say, honestly, I studied them because I'd say, well, those kids are working out well. Let me go over there,
Uh-huh.
and take notes and think about what they're doing. It was a study project for me, really was.
Yeah.
How do I do this? How do I do this differently?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but their resources weren't there. Their
Yeah.
resources are much better now, many years later.
Hmm.
Yeah. There's a
Yep.
lot of them. I wouldn't say all of them are good, but
Yeah.
um, and it depends on the situation. And a
Hmm.
lot of times I don't think people understand that, yes, you may feel like you're in this step family that feels like a nuclear family up until the teenage years hit with the step kids. And then you
So
realize,
hard.
ah, I probably shouldn't have done this, 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 and this. Or
That's
now
right.
it's time to not do these things and to start doing these things.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And that is really where the rubber hits the road. I mean, because they're trying to fly. I mean, it's what they do. I used to teach 18 to 21-year-olds. I mean, that is what their goal is to fly away. And
Mhm.
I always say, there's no other relationship in your life where you say, I love you so much you must leave me. How weird is that?
Except for the insane asylum.
I know. I don't want you to be in my basement. I don't. I want you to fly away.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do. If you
Yeah.
really love your child, it's very hard to let them go.
That's why I'm
And
not
we
letting mine go.
and there you go. See how that works for you.
Yeah. Well, I
For me,
shouldn't
that
say
works so well.
that because my sister said that and she is still living at home and
She's
she's 46.
We all know those stories. We all know those stories.
you don't have to worry about it. He won't be here that long. We'll make sure of it.
If you do it well, they fly away. That's the thing.
That's
If
There
you
you
true.
do it
go.
well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
But
always
what about
say,
when they crash after they leave? Then
There is crashing. There will be crashing.
yeah. Yeah. I always say, when they're little tiny kids and they're so cute, you're like, oh, I could just eat you up. And then when they get to be teenagers, you're like, I really should have ate you.
I know when you say I hate you. Okay, I love you. I hate you. Yeah,
uh-huh.
it's 16, 17 is really hard. I think 17 is the hardest. And
Yeah.
when they came to me, it was fun because someone else's child.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you what, whenever I knew a kid, I often wouldn't know the parents till maybe graduation.
Hmm.
And then I meet them at graduation and think, yeah, good kid, good parents. It went right along with it every time.
You could
Mhm.
And
tell. Yeah,
yep, absolutely. It just works. If you do it right, you make a good, healthy adult. And that is the goal, is always the goal.
that is.
And so not to lose that sight of that is really everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you
Yeah.
know,
It's more important to focus on the child and your love for the child than your disdain for the ex.
Yep.
Absolutely. Nothing matters more than the kid. They didn't choose
Uh-huh.
to be here. They didn't
Right.
choose to be here,
Right.
you know. So what are you going to do about it, you know?
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's hard. I'm not saying that's an easy thing,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but I could really see the difference in the kids that, you know, boy, oh boy, good parenting makes amazing children, amazing adults, young adults, you know.
And
And I got to sit and learn fun.
I bet if you had step kids in your class, you could tell which parent was, well, I don't know at that age, at 18 to 21, there's a little difference, but I'm thinking, you know, it was always obvious where the step kids were the week of
Mm,
school
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Oh
mm,
yeah. I know for mine it was because the teacher would tell
mm.
me, like, we can always tell when they're with you versus their mom.
Mm-hmm.
I was,
That's
That's
sad.
what I will say.
Yeah. Yeah, you want a consistency, you can get it, right? Over
Right.
time.
yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of the kids that I knew, 18 to 21, I mean, the goal for them was to be adults. And
Mm-hmm.
so talking to them instead of their parents is just huge.
Yeah.
You know, what do you want to do? What do you think? And many would come in, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. And I say, yeah, but you're getting C's in chemistry. I don't think you're going to be. So I just let them go. And they got A's over and over again in Chinese language. And I'd say, I think your major is going that direction. So, but they would come to that on their own, you know,
Yeah.
and they'd say, oh dear, this is not where I know it. Your parents want you to be a doctor, but what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beginning of wondering, oh, what do I want, you know?
Mhm.
Right.
And getting them to discover that, whatever that is, you know.
Yeah.
It's a great profession. I have to tell you, it was the best job in the world. You
Yeah.
know, I love those kids. I love them to death and watch them grow from childhood to adulthood. That's really
Yeah.
what you get for 4 years. Kind
Yeah.
of amazing, you
That's
know.
awesome.
Yeah,
So
teaching is the best.
this has been an amazing conversation.
It has.
How can people find your book? Tell us the name, the title of it
Sure.
again, and
It,
then
it
how can they find you if they want to reach out?
okay. My book is a history of step families in early America, and you can find me on Amazon.
Mhm.
Or you can go to the University of North Carolina Press, which is where it was published. Um, but you can easily get it on Amazon. And I have like a little store. You can find me, Lisa Wilson, Press on me, and all my books are there.
Okay.
And then if you want to get a hold of me, you can get my email at Connecticut College, where I worked for all those years.
Okay.
And you just look at the history department and look for me, and I'll be there, and my email address is there. So
All
All
right.
they can
right.
find me
Great.
there.
Thank you so much for writing this book, but also for
Oh,
taking the
thank you.
time to talk to us and enlighten us on some things that I never thought of.
Yeah. We
Thank
learned
you for
that
finding me.
Yeah.
stepmom's been crazy long before now.
I'll tell you. And step families rock. Just want
There
to
you
say
go.
There
they
you go.
Yeah,
rock.
we rock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So nice to meet you guys.
You
All
too.
right.
Thank you. All
Bye
right.
bye.